Hey guys, this is Miko from ML Sound Lab, and today I'll be showing you how we made this guitar neck for this particular guitar. The specs for the neck are pretty cool. We have a really beautiful piece of flame maple, then a really thick piece of ebony as the fretboard, inlays, a really handy place for the truss adjustments, many cool things. Let's check it out. And this is where it all begins once again. Just have a look at the sick figure on this piece of maple that we're using. We'll be using our template for a 27-inch scale length. It's going to be a baritone guitar, so a little bit longer. What this enables me to do is to tune the guitar really low. Right now I have it at G, so it's definitely kind of a gent tuning, but it's a 6-string and really easy to play. Obviously you can't play any high leads because you don't have the really high notes on the guitar, but who wants to hear that anyways? Okay, what we have here in the background is my friend Janne cutting off all the excess and then using two-sided tape to tape on the template, and once again we'll be routing out all the excess edges to get them really fine-tuned for that smooth finish that we want to get. And this is the first time that we really see the figure on the neck, and really happy how it came out. This is us sawing off the excess from the fretboard, and this is a piece of ebony. If you didn't know, ebony can be white or black. We have a small stripe of white ebony there. We'll be using two-sided tape to tape on this fretboard onto this plate that has these places for frets. So that has the fret markers for the scale that we're going to be using, so 27-inch scale. And we'll be using this saw to saw on the holes where we'll be inserting the frets. So this is kind of actually easier way to do this. We don't have to saw it by hand. Let's speed this up. And as you can see, the tools that we're using here are very much custom built by ourselves, or actually by Janne, and it just makes this process so much easier. A really fast way to get the fret holes, and you don't have to actually saw them by hand. This is us cutting the nut hole. This is where the nut will be. Okay, so we're kind of getting there. This is the neck and the fretboard, and where we are right now. The next thing we need to do is make a hole for the truss adjustment. Really need to take a long time to measure things correctly and do this before we glue the fretboard on the neck. We'll be using different size router heads to make it really tight. We need to have the Trussrod be really tight in the hole so it doesn't move, so it doesn't make any sounds when you're waving your guitar around. Stuff like that, it needs to be tight. And this is Janne using the different size router heads, making it fit to the measurements we made. Once again, one more size. And this is the last route for the truss rod. And as you can see, the hole is pretty tight and the truss rod goes in there, and there's no space there for it to move around or make sounds when you clap on the neck or something like that. And what this means is that the neck and the fretboard are now ready to be glued together. So we're measuring the center lines so we can actually fit them together. Obviously doing a really good job at measuring is important here, or else you'll have crooked frets. Also, to ensure that these stay straight, we're drilling through the fretboard to the neck, and then we'll be hammering on some inlay through there. So what it actually does, it makes sure that the alignment stays the same, because many times when you'll add some glue and then try to glue it on, there'll be some movement and you have crooked frets once again. So this is just a really good way of ensuring that there's no movement in the gluing process. So like I said, we used some extra inlay that we had for the top inlay, and we're hammering that plastic through here. This is going to be under the frets, so you'll never see this in the end. It's just here to make sure that the frets are dead straight and there's no problem in the gluing process. Now we're cutting out the excess ebony, so we're just marking down where the edge will be and sawing off the excess. Pretty simple, right? Also, one cool trick and tip is to use tape here, because it's really hard to see a pen on the black ebony. Also, it keeps the ebony from chipping. Okay, the next thing we're doing is adding some tape on top of the truss rod, and we'll be cutting out the excess, but what this does is prevents the glue from going into the truss rod, and your truss rod actually works. Pretty important stuff. Okay, and this is just adding some tight bond. Very simple, adding a little bit too much, as you'll see soon, but you know, better be safe than sorry. We'll be using the finger to really get the glue everywhere. And as you see, the tape is still left underneath just to secure that, you know, the truss rod will not get the glue in there. And this is us using those inlay holes that we marked before to ensure that the fretboard is in the exact place where we want it to go. And this is where you'll notice all the excess glue coming out. This also shows the purpose why we taped the neck. So now that the excess glue is coming out, we can just get it all off really easily by just taking the tape off. And after letting the glue dry, this is what we have. Next thing we need to do is route out the excess ebony to get the edges perfect and smooth. This is once again sped up to save everyone's time. Obviously we will be sanding this a lot throughout in the end, but just wanted to show you how big of a difference it makes once you route out the edges. Okay, next up we'll be starting to work on the tuner holes. We're using our template for the headstock with markers for where the holes need to be for 6 string, and then it's just drilling holes through the headstock. You may notice that it's still quite a thick headstock. It's not going to be like this in the end, so the next phase we will actually use our own kind of method that we're not using anymore. We're using a really cool sander tool for this these days, but here we're essentially routing out layer by layer to get that headstock thinner, and this also gives the strings the angle, so there's the pull against the nut, and now it's perfect and ready. Nope, a lot of sanding still to do. It's actually a problem in some guitars, like Music Man guitars. If you get a really early one, they'll have this part kind of sticking out and you'll have tuning stability problems. It's really crucial to get this out of the way of the strings. And as I warned before, it's time to start sanding a lot. So the next phase is sanding the edges of the neck to ensure that the ebony and the maple are level, and also using a razor blade. If I didn't say this in the last video, building a guitar is like 50% sanding. So if you hate sanding, then you may want to reconsider this. Here you see our measurements for the neck shape, and we also have our custom tool for making this. Essentially we're routing out a layer of wood out, so it's much easier for us to then sand the neck shape. We're starting off by routing a hole essentially to the heel of the neck. You see it there. And then doing the same thing closer to the headstock. You see it here. And then routing out the in-betweens. This is just so we don't have to sand this. Imagine the time it would take for us to sand this piece of wood away. This gives us a really even thickness throughout the neck, and then when we start sanding, it's gonna be so much less effort. And this is sanding a 16-inch radius to the neck. We're using chalk to mark where the sanding is actually biting, so you'll see once you've gone far enough. Personally, I prefer to have thick fretboards, especially if you have ebony, because it's a really strong wood and this keeps your neck straight. That's at least my experience with it. You may disagree, but if I have a really thick ebony fretboard, I feel like I never have to fine-tune the neck. It's always gonna be dead straight the way I like it. And if you didn't guess it already, here in the background you're seeing us measuring where we will place the inlays on the fretboard. So we're actually going to be drilling holes into these intersections here, and in those holes we will be gluing the abalone that kind of matches the greenish color of the guitar. And here we go. We're going to be drilling these holes, obviously not through, just enough so we can actually glue in the inlay. Let's speed this up and I'll shut up and let's just enjoy Janne doing what he does best. Oh yeah. Okay, and now that we're done, we're going to be adding some glue into the holes and then placing the abalone inside and hammering the abalone in there. And what's really funny looking is once you speed this thing up. So let's have a look. Right now I'm thinking about all the guitars that don't have any inlays and how much time they kind of spared not doing that. Obviously some people enjoy the look of not having inlays, but I'm sure the factory guys and the guitar manufacturers love it when they don't have to do this. Saves them a lot of time and money. So if you really imagine this, measuring out, drilling out holes, gluing in a piece of something, then needing to sand it off. Yes, we need to sand this to be level after this. It's actually a lot of work. Okay, and this is us measuring where we'll be putting the inlays, and I think I said this already. This will be luminlays that glow in the dark. So if you're on a dark stage, you can still see where your guitar is and where your hand is. These will glow green, of course, because the guitar is the teal color. So all the color schemes match perfectly. And once again, drilling a hole and then gluing in some luminlay. So this is Janne actually doing it. Hammering in some luminlay, then cutting off the excess using that same piece and gluing that to the next hole and cutting it off and yada 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 yada. Obviously speeding this up once again to save some time. There goes the last one. And now what we have left is the inlays are sticking out, so what we need to do is sand them off. Once again with the radius block, we'll be sanding until we get a really even surface. So as you can see, the abalone is now getting sanded away. And for entertainment purposes, let's speed this thing up. So this is Janne sanding away the inlay excess. And I think this is a good time to remember that Janne is such a good guy. He essentially built me this guitar, and it's a lot of work. And I realized that with these videos, Janne's Instagram has kind of gone crazy, and many of you guys are asking him to build a guitar. And just remember how much effort it is to make a guitar. So you're asking a lot. But never say never, but be gentle. Also, if you want me to work on your guitar, this is what I can do. I can point out where you need to do a better job, once again. Same thing for the luminlays. Now you need to sand off all the excess from the luminlays, and let's speed this up once again. Need to get that edge even, and then it's ready to go. The next thing that we'll be doing is the neck shape, and obviously this has a big effect on the feel of the actual instruments. We're going for a symmetric shape. I would say it's a C shape, a modern C shape. Janne kind of has his own system for making this. He's trying to get it as perfect as he possibly can. I think Janne has measured my Music Man Petrucci neck, and this is pretty close to it. Just takes a lot of effort to get it perfect by hand with no CNC machines. Obviously, after this face is done, it's all gonna be rounded, so this edge will be gone now. And once again, I feel super fortunate for not being the guy doing this. Janne is a perfectionist. He will work on it until it's perfect. He enjoys it. If it was me making this, probably would have skipped a few faces, but I'm lucky that Janne is making this guitar. Here we're sanding off all the awkward parts and making it feel super smooth in your hands once again. And once the shape feels correct, we'll be smoothing out all the harsh parts and finally sanding it to be butter smooth. I feel like I'm saying butter and smooth a lot in these videos. But I think that's just because that's the feel of the guitar in the end. And this is Janne sanding the fretboard for the final fine sanding. I promised myself I wouldn't make a nut hole joke because I'm a mature person. So this is Janne making the hole for the nuts. Absolutely nothing funny about that. Nothing. And Janne just loves to file holes. Then it's time for the final sanding for the fretboard, because once we put on the frets, nothing you can do about it anymore, so need to do a good job here. And here we go, hammering on the frets very lightly and then pressing it with the fret press. Afterwards, we're cutting out the excess from the sides and then duplicate the process 23 more times. So let's speed this thing up. And as a safety measure, just hammering on where we feel like maybe we could have pressed a little bit harder. Damn you, Janne, do a better job. And we're using this very special tool, which is a fret end file. Probably has a better name, but that's the one that I just came up with. Turn it sideways and you get the angle for the fret as well. Really handy tool. After that, we're kind of rounding off the edges to feel like the guitar is being played for 100,000 years exactly by Iron Man. Okay, and the moment of truth. This is what's gonna... Oh no, that's the wrong cut. Yeah, it's the base coat. Okay, a couple of layers of base coat, and then we'll be adding the emerald teal on top. Now it looks correct. And some lacquer on top of that, and then we'll be kind of buffing or polishing that lacquer into a smooth and buttery finish. Once again. Okay, next up we're doing the fret work. It's a lot of work, but before you start doing it, it's crucial to get the neck straight. So that's what we're doing here. Another important task is to tape off everything you don't want to get dirty and stuff like that. So we're taping off the edges and then taping the fretboard even, so none of the dirt that comes from the frets will be going into the fretboard nor the neck would, especially when we don't have any finish on the neck yet. We'll be using a marker to mark the top of the fret, so once we start filing we can see once things are level. And now you probably understand why we did that. So once we start sanding or filing off the top of the frets, you'll quickly see where there's blue left, and if it's blue then it's still not quite level with all the other frets. So repeat and do it again, repeat and do it again until you get it perfect. Once you do get it perfect, we use a marker again, and now we're filing the edges of the frets so they're not flat on top. So what we're trying to do is leave just a little bit of that marker on top of the fret and kind of file the edges. So what you end up with is these perfectly in-line frets that are kind of standing with a sharp edge. The feel is just amazing. Honestly, I have a bunch of premium guitars. I would say that Janne's fret job feels better than most of my guitars. I feel like taking all of my bad guitars and make Janne do the fret work, but as you can see, it's a lot of work, asking for a lot when you do this. Okay, and now Janne is using steel wool to polish the frets to make them really shine and feel even better once you're playing with them. And after that phase, Janne is taking off all the dirt from the frets, so after working on them and sanding them, you will still have some dirt on them to make them really shine. You get rid of all the dirt from the frets, so keeps your guitar clean as well. And after this phase, we're adding the oil finish to the neck, which really gets the wood grain out and it starts to look really beautiful. Also, it gives you this satin feel. It doesn't give you that lacquer, sticky, icky, yicky in your hand type feel. We're using crimson oil, People use gunstock oil or tongue oil or stuff like that. We use the one that Crimson sells. Feel like it's really good for this purpose, and it's really easy to put on, really made for this use case. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy with how this neck came out. Like, just look at that figure that we have. The flame is crazy on this neck, and Jana did an awesome job getting this perfect. Okay, and that's it for the neck. As you can probably tell, there's still something to do before the guitar is finished, so subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the third and most likely final part for this DIY guitar. Chicka-pow.